Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it is 1 minute after 5 o'clock. While few people are still joining us, I still don't want to lose our precious time. Wish you a good afternoon. Warm welcome from Berlin on behalf of the Heinrich Böll Foundation to our virtual roundtable, European-Ukrainian virtual roundtable on energy transition. Today on the topic of the current and future role of nuclear power in Ukraine. It's my pleasure to welcome you here. My name is Robert Sperrfeld. I'm the program officer for East and Southeast Europe at the Heinrich Böll Foundation's head office in Berlin. This is the third edition of this roundtable format. In the first two discussions, we addressed more specifically the situation and the reform process of the electricity market and the conditions for the renewable sector in the second edition. And this time we have chosen the nuclear sector as our topic, and one and perhaps the main reason for choosing it was the recent announcement by President Zelensky to restart the construction of 2 nuclear reactor blocks in Khmelnytsky. As Heinrich Böll Foundation, we want to bring forward the debate on the transition towards a just and decarbonized design of the economy. So we want to offer platforms for constructive dialogue on how to cope with related social, economic, and political challenges. Looking particularly to Ukraine, precisely this debate is a major focus of our activities. And one part of it is also the exchange with European stakeholders. This is why we are hosting this series of events. As most of you know, there are many links, legislative, political, bilateral, multilateral cooperation on energy sector reform. I will leave all further introductions to the topic and with regard to our speakers to my colleague Oksana Alieva, our energy program coordinator in our Kiev office. She will moderate the discussion. But before handing over to her, I have very few technical remarks. First, as this is an expert roundtable and we are not too many participants, everyone can use the chat function, the chat room that you can open in the bottom bar of your Zoom window. And after the first round of discussion among the panelists, you can then also pose a question to the panelists or a comment. Please use the blue hand function in Zoom for it. You will find it when you open the participants bar. Click on the participants button on the bottom of your Zoom window. Second is that you should be aware that we are recording this event. So in case you want to ask a question, you would be recorded. Last not least, we would like to ask you to fill in a short survey on feedback to this event, and we will post a link to this survey in the chat then towards the end of the discussion. So this is it from my side. I'm curious to learn more from our distinguished speakers this afternoon. And I'm handing over to Oksana.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and finding time to be with us to discuss such an issue as the future of nuclear sector in Ukraine. First of all, let me to present our prominent panelists. Today with us are Natalia Rybalka, who is Deputy Director of Directorate for Development of Nuclear Energy of the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine. Also, we have Alexandra Zaika, who is energy policy expert from the environmental NGO EcoAction. We have Mr. Massimo Gariba, who is Deputy Director General at Directorate General for Energy, and his group is coordinating Euroatom. And we have Mr. Anthony Froggatt, who is Senior Research Fellow at Chatham House, and he is co-author of the World Nuclear Industry Status Report. So we will start with the introduction statements from our panelists. And we hope that this part will not last longer than half of an hour. And after it, we will pass to the questions and answer session. And as Robert just mentioned, it is very important for us to have your input in today's discussion. So we really welcome and will appreciate if you have questions to the panelists, to the speakers, or you wanted to comment something. So we really encourage you to do so. And yep, why we are here? Because the recent announcement by the Ukrainian President Zelensky on decision to complete the construction of 2 additional reactor blocks at Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant has attracted again new attention to the perspective of what is the future for the nuclear sector in Ukraine. We know that those existing units at the 4 nuclear stations in Ukraine are almost all outdated. So the major part of them have already expired the extended lifetime, and we will know more about the situation in general afterwards from the representatives of the Ministry of Energy. But what we also would like to stress today on, this is not only the real possibility of the finishing construction at the sorted 4th unit at Khmelnytsky nuclear power station that was started in the middle of 80s of previous century, but to talk in more general on the perspectives of future in Ukraine, because it is not usually discussed at the political level in Ukraine at the moment, neither within the country, no when we come to international relations or to bilateral communication with the European Union, because it is something very complicated to decide at the moment, and we really understand this, that if we discuss the future of the nuclear energy, we can't talk about phasing out all of the nuclear sector in just a few years. But we need to start the process with the overall vision where we want to see the role of the nuclear sector in the future energy balance of Ukraine. But to do so, for sure, we need to, for all of us, we need to know better what is the current state of affairs and what role nuclear sector plays in the Ukrainian energy, particularly power market, and in the energy balance in general. And thus, I'm inviting to the first input speech, Mrs. Natalia Rybalka, who is Deputy Director of Directorate of Development of Nuclear Energy and Nuclear Industry of the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine. So please, Natalia, tell us about what is the current situation with the nuclear sector in Ukraine and what are those policy measures that are already in place.
Okay, I'm here?
Yes, we hear you. I see your presentation. Just please start from the very beginning, and we are very curious to listen.
Okay, I will give just a very short overview I will try to be short, of the nuclear energy sector in Ukraine. The main nuclear installation in Ukraine, maybe you know, they consist of 50 nuclear power units at 4 NPP sites. The overall capacity, installed capacity is 13 and 385 gigawatt. Percentage in the share in electricity generation in Ukraine is more than 50%. It's mostly the 53 to 55% the last years. And design operational time was continued already for 10 to 20 years for 11 power units already. So also in our nuclear sector, we have Chernobyl NPP with their 3 reactors, RBMK, in the decommissioning and the new safe confinement in operation. We have fewer research reactors in Kiev and Sevastopol, and we have enterprises for uranium mining, and of course some enterprises which managed with radioactive waste. So I will more focus my presentation on the nuclear sector for nuclear power plants, not for other. So within our legal and regulatory framework, the main national policy principles are established in basic laws, such as law on nuclear energy use and radiation safety, law on radioactive waste management, and law on ratification on Convention of Nuclear Safety, law on licensing in the field of nuclear energy use, and other legislation. The main principles include the very general, as any international, I think, legislation. It consists on priority of safety, radiation protection principles, responsibility allocation, radioactive waste management minimization principle, responsibility for financial and insurance during nuclear energy use, regulatory system, social issues, and transparency, public involvement, and international cooperation, and also the principle to separate the state regulatory and state management functions, separate the state management in nuclear energy use and state management in radioactive waste disposal and long-term storage. And the last separation is separate the activity and responsibility of state authorities and operator. So the state management system, it's you can see on this chart. On the top level is the Cabinet of Ministry of Ukraine. Under the government, we have the Ministry of Energy and Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine, which is a regulatory body, and then Ministry of Environmental Protection, which deal with the radioactive waste management sector, and Ministry of Energy managed the main operator of nuclear power plants. It's Energoatom, and also managed the enterprises for uranium mining. So the national strategy in the nuclear sector is established in a few legal regulations, such as the main of them, the energy strategy of Ukraine until 2035, is the safety, energy efficiency, and competitiveness. It is the name of the strategy. And they also, for spent fuel, we have law on spent fuel management for siting, design and construction of the centralized spent fuel storage facility for Ukrainian NPP with VVR reactors. We have concept of state economical program of atomic industry development. Then we have concept of state economical program of spent nuclear fuel management for Ukrainian NPPs. We have state ecological program, state ecological program for urgent measures for transformation of former uranium site into the safe state. Then we have radioactive management strategy and state national program for Chernobyl NPP decommissioning and shelter transformation into environmentally safe system. So it's a main, I think, the national strategical documents in place. And some of them, they are under development. For now, we are considering draft of the concept of the long-term safe state economical program for nuclear energy development. It's the overall document which is developed now by the operator, Energoatom, and this document is under review of the Ministry of Energy and also under the expert review. And this document, we hope when it could be legally approved by the government, it could just focus on the long-term strategy for development of nuclear sector in Ukraine. Then we have draft state economical program of spent nuclear fuel management for Ukrainian NPP up to 2025, and draft of the concept of the state ecological program of radioactive waste management. It is developed by State Agency of Exclusion Zone Management, which is their the state management authority for radioactive waste management. And also we plan the periodical review and updated of decommissioning concept for all operated NPP. Now I will a few words. Oksana already mentioned the recent order of the President of Ukraine, number 406 from the 20th of September. And according to this order, the issue of the corporatization of the state enterprise Energoatom is under consideration by Ministry of Energy with account to Deloitte company recommendations. And we also consider the issue of enhancing of the state management system for Energoatom, and the issue of the feasibility of finishing construction of units 3 and 4 of Khmelnytsky NPP. So all these issues are right now under considerations and discussions. Then I would just draw your attention to the sustainable operational safety, because the main issue of the nuclear energy use is the safety.
Natalie, I just wanted to remind you about keeping the time. We are already out of the time, and so just please few minutes of the most key issues.
So this operational safety is it is a main document, is comprehensive overall program of safety improvement for Ukrainian NPP power units, and with the additional measures according to the stress tests results after the Fukushima Daiichi accident. And the objectives of this comprehensive program are enhance of operational safety level of NPP and to comply them with the national and international regulations, a decrease of accidental risk at NPP due to extreme natural events and disaster, and increase of management efficiency of design and beyond design accidents at NPP, and minimization of consequences of such events, and to develop conditions for the design operational time continuation for the units. So implementation, results of implementation of this program, they lead to that radiation parameters and characteristics of NPP operation not exceed the current regulations and norm. The radiation protection of operational staff and members of public complies with the requirements, and NPP operation does not lead to the ecology changes which could influence the environment in the NPP sites regions. And according to the conclusions of International Atomic Energy Agency and European Commission experts, the safety level of Ukrainian NPP complies with international strategy, standards and recommendations. Energy strategy. So then I have a few slides just about the spent fuel management. That now we have energy within the energy strategy. We develop the centralized spent fuel storage facility for VVR, for spent fuel from VVR reactor. It's now under the finishing of construction in the Chernobyl NPP exclusion zone. And currently, before finishing this new facility, the Ukraine implements both the design procedure for spent fuel management, which foresee transport of spent fuel from NPP for reprocessing to the Russian Federation, with receiving back the radioactive waste after reprocessing, and also long-term storage on the Zaporizhia NPP site. On one of the NPP in Zaporizhia, we have their own spent fuel dry storage facility. And of course, the NPPs implement a wide range measures for radioactive waste management strategy. They built the design and construction of solid and liquid radioactive waste reprocessing facility to produce packages accepted for disposal. So this wide range of facilities and technologies which could be applied. It includes retrieval facilities, sorting, fragmentation, compaction, grouting, incineration. So all general technologies of radioactive waste. So thank you for your attention. It's just a very short overview.
Thank you so much, Natalia. I was personally happy to hear that there are such documents like concept of the long-term development for the nuclear sector is under preparing at the moment, and that there is a draft decommissioning strategy that is also under development. I really hope that this document would be available for the further public discussion very soon, because so far there are no consultations happening as far as I know. And also for sure, thank you for mentioning the safety issues, because safety first, let's be frank with each other. Safety is the most important issue when we speak about the nuclear sector in Ukraine. And here I would like to invite Alexandra Zaika from the environmental NGO EcoAction to share their position on the nuclear sector in Ukraine. So how do you assess it?
Thank you, Oksana. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to join today's discussion. As a representative of an environmental NGO, I'd like to say that we are very worried about the state of nuclear power in Ukraine. Our main concerns are, first of all, its artificially lowered price for the nuclear electricity. Second is spent nuclear fuel and radioactive waste management. Third is dependency on Russia. And the fourth is unrealistic plans of development of the nuclear industry. So I'd like to explain the points I've mentioned. First, the lowered price. It is true that in Ukraine, the tariff for the nuclear electricity is the lowest among other power sources. But it doesn't mean that nuclear power is cheap. In Ukraine, the tariff does not cover all costs and negative externalities related to the production of nuclear electricity. For example, it doesn't cover the full cost of radioactive waste management and doesn't cover the cost of spent nuclear fuel management. As well, the money collected to the decommissioning fund are not enough, and also they are exposed to the inflation, which doesn't improve the situation with the fund. The second point is spent nuclear fuel. In Ukraine, right now, we have only one storage for the spent fuel on the Zaporizhzhia NPP site. The fuel from the remaining NPPs have to be stored in the central storage that is located in Chernobyl. But right now, it's not possible because after a number of construction delays, the storage is still not ready to be used. And this leads us to the next point that we are concerned about, and it is a dependency on Russia. While we can't use our storage for spent fuel, we are sending our fuel from 3 other NPPs except of Zaporizhzhia for storage and reprocessing to Russia. For this, every year, Ukraine pays around $200 million. Also, 100% of the nuclear fuel used on our NPPs is imported. About 60% of the fuel we use is still manufactured by the Russian company called TVEL. American company called Westinghouse produces the remaining part. So that means that Ukraine is fully dependent on the other countries when it comes to the nuclear fuel for our power plants. And the last but not least is that Ukraine has unrealistic plans regarding the development of nuclear industry. All over the world, countries begin the phase out of nuclear power. No new reactors have been commissioned in the European Union and the United States in the last 10 years, as it's not economically feasible. But in August, state-owned nuclear operator Energoatom started to talk about the construction of units 3 and 4 of Khmelnytsky NPP. And last month, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, instructed the cabinet of ministers to develop and submit to Verkhovna Rada a bill on design and construction of the units 3 and 4 of Khmelnytsky NPP. Frankly, this project is a nonsense. Why? Energoatom plans to use old constructions which were not examined for the last 14 years. And there is no proof that they are safe to use. As well, there is only 2 companies in the world who can provide reactors for those units, and they both are Russian. Economically, this project is not feasible. There is no finances for its implementation. So we believe it is more effective to invest money in energy efficiency and the renewables. And those are our concerns about the nuclear industry in Ukraine. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for such a balanced addressing of those challenges we face here in Ukrainian energy sector towards the nuclear. And continue on this, on those concerns that we have, I also would like to ask Mr. Massimo Gariba who is Deputy Director of Directorate General on Energy of European Commission. European Union is the, let me say, the most reliable partner of Ukraine at the moment, and we really need to appreciate it. That is why for us, as for Ukrainian society in general, it is very important to know your assessments on what is happening. And especially we are interested to know, for example, those aspects of EU monitoring on progress in safety upgrades in Ukrainian stations. Does at all European Union follow financial and technical capacity of Ukraine, for example, for safety upgrades, for decommissioning of lifetime expired reactors, and so on? And how does this influence European-Ukrainian relations in the energy sector and could influence in future?
Thank you, Oksana. All this in 7 minutes will be a world record, but I will try to do my best to say a few things. First of all, let me say that the Ukraine is a strategic partner for the EU, and that we've been gradually working to align energy policy and legislation to the EU norms and standards. Ukraine has an ambitious energy agenda based on the EU association agreement in force since 2017, where there is a, I would say, large annex which concerns energy altogether. We also acknowledge that there have been far-reaching reforms in the past years and important structural changes in the energy sectors. So I think that we should encourage altogether the government to keep moving in this direction and continue reform towards the creation of a fully functioning and competitive electricity and gas market, which is one of the key prerequisites where you can have a functioning energy system. Whether it's nuclear or not nuclear doesn't matter. The market is very important to achieve the right conditions. Now, there was a summit on the 6th of October where the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, and the High Representative for EU Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell, met President Zelensky. And there was a political impulse to accelerate the efforts which are in this Annex 17 of the association agreement. I think that this sets the overall framework. Now, if we move a little bit towards the subject matter, which is nuclear, Ukraine has agreed to align its legislation to the European one on nuclear safety, safe management of radioactive waste and spent fuel, and radiation protection. We are supporting these legislative efforts also with a number of projects which are financed by our external branch, the so-called DG Development and Cooperation. It has changed name last week and I don't know the new name. But I think that everybody knows it as DG Development and Cooperation for the moment, on implementation and transposition of nuclear safety regulation based on the EU experience and the EU acquis. So the target is to have in place a robust Ukrainian regulatory framework based on the highest standards of safety for the autumn of next year. This is where we are working at. There should be also a sectoral meeting between my commissioner, Ms. Simpson, and the acting Minister of Energy, and we are working to have that before the end of the year. But as you understand, circumstances at the moment are rather complex. In the Euratom field, we have a number of bilateral agreements with the Ukraine. We have an overall agreement on nuclear cooperation, but we have also specific agreements on nuclear safety, on development of nuclear fusion, nuclear research and development nuclear research and development, trade in nuclear material, and nuclear fuel cycle services. So all these helps to create the basic conditions to work indeed on the alignment of the two systems. Since '86, moreover, the Ukraine has been a continuous focus of EU nuclear safety policy following Chernobyl. You are perfectly aware that the EU has heavily invested in trying to mitigate the post-Chernobyl consequences in Ukraine and Belarus. The Chernobyl Shelter Fund, which was managed through the EBRD, was one of our main contributions, to which we provided 430 million euro. And last year in February, I actually went and visited in Chernobyl because it had recently been completed. One important thing is that the shelter is a temporary structure, as you know, designed to last a certain number of years, and therefore the decommissioning of reactor number 4 of the Chernobyl site is one of the big commitments which are pending on the Ukrainian government. Beyond this, you are also aware that there has been a number of measures to strengthen nuclear safety in the Ukraine. There is a combined 600 million euro loan between the Commission and the EBRD, which supports the complex consolidated safety upgrade program developed by Energoatom, which to my knowledge amounts to something like 1.74 billion euros. So we are in the range of a 30% contribution to that. It is a comprehensive program of safety improvements, modernization, of monitoring and control equipment, installation of new equipment, and safety operational measures. We had some difficulties in disbursing some of this money because of the, I would say, perceived slowness of aligning certain parts of the Ukrainian nuclear safety legislation with ours. However, in particular, regarding the effective independence of the nuclear safety regulator, but in the spring of this year, the law was passed through the Ukrainian parliament, and therefore this issue was resolved and the money was released. As it was mentioned already, Ukraine also fully participated in the post-Fukushima stress test in 2011-2012. Most of the safety measures, let me say, like a European member state, they were fully integrated in the process, and this is contrary to what is happening, for example, in neighboring Belarus today, where we are looking at the Astravets nuclear power plant, but with a very much delayed timetable. The stress tests are being completed now in Belarus. So in the Ukraine, they were completed together with the rest of the EU in 2012. There are some outstanding safety measures, and we expect completion by the end of next year. All the material which has to do with the stress test is publicly available on the NSREG website, nsreg.eu. Ukraine also participated to one provision of the new revised safety directive that followed the revision of the post-Chernobyl, post-Fukushima legislation in 2014. we have a so-called topical peer review, which takes place every 6 years. In 2018, we carried out the first one, which was on the aging structures. So it was, I would say, particularly suited to some of the situations that there are in the Ukraine, namely the average age of the fleet, which is around 33 years old. We are initiating preparation for the second peer review exercise, which should take place in 2022-23, and we very much welcome the participation of the Ukrainian regulators in that. So I think I gave you a little bit, I will stop here, I think I gave you a few elements of the type of collaboration that we see developing between us and the Ukraine, and be reassured that from the EU we will continue to use all instruments at our disposal, legislative, financial, of pressure, let me say, through international organizations and so on, to ensure that the highest possible safety levels are achieved when nuclear installations are operated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gariba, for keeping time in and for your very fruitful and information-based input. We really see that you follow what is happening in Ukraine, even might be better than some Ukrainian stakeholders. Before passing to the international context on nuclear sector and Ukraine role in it and Ukraine situation from the perspective of international circumstances, knowing your very limited time availability, I just wanted to open a few question session to you before you left. I already see one hand raised, so might be let's already start with this question. So I see a hand from Oleg Savitsky.
Hello, Oleg Savitsky, board member of NGO EcoAction and also expert of Ukrainian Climate Network. My question to Mr. Gariba relates to the comprehensive safety upgrade program, which is also funded by Euratom on part with EBRD. And as we know from communications and public documentation, that there should be a regular monitoring of this program from the lender perspective, and that under the initial conditions of this loan, there was a statement that EBRD and Euratom will use services of consultant, namely the so-called lenders monitoring consultant, to prepare regular reports. Are those reports public is the first question, and how many of them already been performed? And the second question related to this is there any indications in those reports of issues which became known nationally this year, namely problems with backup diesel generators? Maybe I'm sure that you're informed that on 25th September, we had an accident at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, ranked as INS-1 accident by the state regulator, when we had a malfunction of the diesel generator during his test launch. And to our knowledge, we don't have any information on successful tests of diesel generators before that at Zaporizhzhia. nuclear power plant, and we as civil society are very concerned on the safety of this power plant, which is the largest in Europe, and at least for every 6 units there should be an operational diesel generators, which the station has in total 12, and we don't have any information on successful tests of those diesel generators in last 10 years.
Okay, thank you. So let's let our panelists to reply. So please, Mr. Gariba.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very detailed questions. Now, as far as the loan follow-up is concerned, I'm afraid I'm not in a position to tell you all the numbers of the reports and so on. I have not followed these personally, but what I can tell you is that there are two bodies, the Lenders Monitoring Consultant and the Project Management Unit at the EBRD, that receive quarterly reports from the ground. So this is something that it is routinely done. And it is done because, indeed, this is needed to closely monitor the loan execution, payment forecast, and schedules, as I have tried to explain before. Now, whether the reports are public, this I have to tell you that I severely doubt, because I know how the EBRD works. So I'm not so sure that this is something that is full in the public domain. What I can say is that I can inquire and come back to you on that. Now, as far as the diesel generators at Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, yes, we are fully informed, and thanks to one of the participants, I saw that my good colleagues and old friend Jan Averkamp is in the audience. Jan very timely informed me and informed also the European Club of Nuclear Regulators, ENSREG, on the situation. And the only thing that I would like to say is that we are looking at these in ENSREG, and when we have our meeting at the beginning of November, I think the 10th of November, this is one of the items which will be on the agenda. And so we will have also the official reaction from the European regulators. I think, being such a technical matter, it is much more appropriate for them to comment on the status than from a technocrat like me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see the hand raised, and I remind now that we collect questions only to Mr. Gariba at the moment, because he will leave in a few minutes. So if you have just direct question to him, this is a proper time to do it. If no, we will have a questions and answers session after the last panelist, Mr. Anthony Frogat, will deliver his speech. So if Anna Verevenland, if you have direct question to Mr. Gariba, just please do it right now, raise it.
Hi to you all. I'm just here at a German nuclear power plant, so I can comment on this diesel, emergency diesel question as well. But my question goes to Massimo. It's another one. Can you give us at least one example for modernization or upgrading project with Ukrainian nuclear power plants, which is co-authored or enhanced by European Union? Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. No, the short answer is no. I'm not aware of anything which is actually concluded and done.
Thank you so much. We still hope to have more questions and answers in the discussion session. And now I wanted to invite Mr. Anthony Frogat to put the Ukrainian nuclear sector in the international context. So how those processes that are happening in Ukraine correspond to what is happening in the world, and especially might be, you can comment on those potential and perspectives of construction of new units at the Khmelnytsky NPP. So what are those, for example, prices for construction of new units worldwide? So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you see my screen? I'm not sure if you can.
We see it, but not in the full screen mode so far.
It's odd, I can't. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. It seems to be. Is that better? Yes.
Yeah, it works now.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so my name is Anthony Froggatt. I'm a senior research fellow at Chatham House, and independent of that, I work on a project called the World Nuclear Industry Status Report. And this has been underway for a couple of decades, actually, and I work with a colleague called Michael Snyder. And the latest version of this was published in September. And so what I'll do is just present a few slides that give an overview. I mean, it's a huge document. I don't know how many pages, a few hundred pages, and it can be seen, you'll see the web link at the end. But just, I guess the first thing, which most people are aware of, but the extent of it, I think is understood. It's misunderstood. In the blue here, we have the reactor startups around the world. And you can see basically that going up through until the sort of mid-1980s. And there was, this has primarily been affected by a number of things. Firstly, nuclear accidents. So you can see in the, I don't know if I show my mouse, can you see my mouse? Yeah, so this is in 1979. So you can see there a decrease in reactor startups. And that was primarily as a result of the 3 Mile Island accident in the United States. And then you can see the sort of the peak of the curve is in 1985, 1986. And so that was really as a result of Chernobyl. You saw a slowdown in reactor startups. There was obviously people were concerned about safety, so some were delayed, but also then the real decline, to which the industry has never really recovered in terms of reactor new startups, and that sort of goes on now over the last couple of decades. And below the line is the reactor closures. And you can see that some of this historically is just old reactors that didn't work very well. And then you saw peaks here in sort of 1990, which was then the closure of reactors as a result of the unification of Germany. And then other ones here in 2011, which is the Fukushima event. So an overall clear trend. And what we've seen most recently is in terms of 2020, is the closure of a number of reactors. So far this year, 3 reactors have closed, and the startup of a couple. And in this case, it was in the United Arab Emirates. So that was the first time that a sort of new country, a country that hasn't had nuclear power before, has started up reactors for a couple of decades, and then one more in China. And China, as in all things in the energy sector, dominates in terms of the numbers. Just in terms of the EU, I guess a similar pattern. We've talked about the impact of Chernobyl and the closure here, or the slowdown of orders. Here we have, I mentioned this in terms of the unification of Germany. And here we can see the last 3 reactors being ordered or startups in Europe. So Temelin is in the Czech Republic and Černovoda is in Romania. And so, yeah, over the last couple of decades, really no new startups and lots of closures. And this is for a combination of reasons. This closures is partly political. So for example, in Germany, you have a phase out decision that was reintroduced following Fukushima. that will see the closure of all of the reactors sometime next decade, so within the next 5 years. And some of them are just industrial decisions, just reactors are coming to the end of their operating lives, like in the UK. You see all of the oldest reactors designed, the Magnox reactors, are now closed, and similar reactor closures in Sweden, etc. So in terms of going forward, I guess one of the key issues for the industry is are they building more reactors? And so we can see here in terms of number of units, we have around 50 reactors around the world are being built. In terms of capacity, this is around 53 gigawatts. So really rather small compared to the sort of the global nuclear fleet that's around 400 and something, and very small in terms of the overall capacity of the power grids around the world, and is dominated by a small number of countries. And basically, I would say that there is only China, India, South Korea, and Russia that have reactors being built in more than one site. So I would argue that all of the others, basically, you don't have a active program, you have a construction at a site. But China obviously dominates, as I mentioned, it dominates most things within the power sector. It has 15 units out of 52. But this is really a slowdown. And again, it was affected by Fukushima in terms of the reactors that it was ordering. So reactor orders a handful of countries. And why is that? And I think probably this is one of the most important slides to think about. So this is taken from Lazard, which is a consulting company in the United States. And they do this every year. And what they're doing is looking at the levelized cost of electricity. So this LCOE, which is what it's talking about is what is the production costs of electricity in the United States from all of these different electricity generating sources. And here we see solar, which started off 10 years ago, producing power at around $350 a megawatt hour, down to today to below 50. Likewise, you have wind here, which is from around 135 down to around 40. And you have nuclear, which is this purple one here, that is going from around $123 a megawatt hour to 155.
You mean costs?
So this is the levelized cost of electricity. Yeah. So yeah, it's very clear we have different trends, and this is trends that we're seeing all over the world. That the costs of renewable energy is falling, while the costs of nuclear is at best ecstatic, but in many cases it's going up. And this is the decision. Mr. Massimo was talking about the desire in Ukraine for the introduction of a electricity market. And if you have a free electricity market, then the market will choose probably the cheapest source. And here we see what the cheapest source is in United States. But as I said, this is representative of many countries around the world. Clearly, there are other questions. It's not just about the actual generating costs of electricity. It's also about what's the cost to the overall system. And I'm sure that we'll come into this in the discussion in terms of the need for flexibility within the systems. But this really is the key picture in terms of which are now the cheaper generating sources. And my final slide, because I need to finish up, is just to say this is the global investment in nuclear power versus renewables, again, over the last 15 years or so. And what we see here in the line in purple along the bottom is when investments were made in nuclear power and how much they were versus the investments per year that were made in renewable energies. And the key thing here is that on the global level, investments are about an order of magnitude larger between renewables and nuclear power. And what that means is that as there is more investments, then what we've seen is that the costs of renewables continue to fall. As you have learning curves, you have greater deployment levels, while you have very little investment in nuclear power and you don't see the same economies of scale. And so one would expect that the trends that we saw in the previous graph will continue, if not accelerate, on the global level. So in terms of as countries seek to and need to decarbonize rapidly and cheaply, then I would argue that probably what we're increasingly seeing is that renewables, solar and wind, are the cheapest option. And they are cheaper than not only nuclear, but increasingly of fossil fuels such as coal and gas as well. So I think that is the choice facing electricity planners around the world. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Mr. Froggatt. And yep, what we see now is also coinciding with what we heard from Mr. Massimo Gariba, who has left because of his other responsibilities, but we are very thankful to him for his participation. If the power market is fully functioning, then those economic reasons, they influence what future developments in energy sector we will see. And if levelized cost of electricity production is lower for renewables, then it's clear where investments will go. And this is what is happening in the world. So thank you for addressing this. And we can open the questions and answer session at the moment that I see already some hands raised and questions posted in chat, and you also can do it. You can raise your hand or post your question in chat. And what I would like to start with is the question from the Birgit Wetzel, because this question, I think, is really one we are all interested to know the reply on. What are plans for the future energy landscape in Ukraine? Do we, as a country, know where we are going with the nuclear sector? Do we want to keep those nuclear units for an eternal time? I'm not sure who from today's panelists can give a precise answer for this question, but I would like to address it to Natalia Rybalka, representative of the Ministry of Energy. So what are the overall plan? For example, do you know what is written on that concept of the long-term development strategy for the nuclear sector? For how long Ukraine is going to rely on nuclear? And is it about existing nuclear power plants and those units, or construction, for example, of new ones?
So we have, I think that Ukraine have no alternative decision. Ukraine should use nuclear energy. Any other source of energy, electricity, can't replace the nuclear for now. And I think that this situation would remain for a long time in future. So that's the main reason for developing this long-term strategy is considering the future, because now the situation is more or less clear, because until 2035 we would have reactors, remaining reactors still operated, and the reactors which were continued their lifetimes, they also would be operated, but after the 2035 it would be the time when the lifetime of the major amount of operated reactors would be extended, and then we could think about renew the power of nuclear energy. So this construction of new technologically maybe new units, it should be in this strategy. This should be either the big units or it should be smaller, and now considering the small modular reactors. It's very, now also Ukraine is join this field and this signed memorandum with, I think, some partners international to study this issue, the possibility, especially, for example, for Rona NPP when they have no too much power in the nuclear power plant, so they could be easily exchanged with the fewer, for example, such small reactors. But there's all issues of more deep expert analysis. So I could not give now some particular and straight prognosis, and I don't have them because nobody have know them. But when this document would be, I don't just put in, when the ministry would consider it and by itself started to make it legal, in this process, this document would be made public, I think, as a usual procedure of public involvement for discussing on any draft of some legal document or strategy. And I think this, any public could be involved and all interested parties could influence and could make the proposals to this strategy. But I think that we have no other choice. We should remain our energy. Just we see here today from European expert, and thanks him very much, from Massimo, and he told that Ukrainian NPP absolutely they prove the safety on all international levels, and they continue to do so, and they make efforts developing regulations, making the comprehensive program for safety improvement, and this all is very open to all international community, and so that up to now we have no other choice, because nuclear electricity is remain the most cheap on the market, and just the problem that the nuclear market should be put in more, let's say, honest position on the market, because they have no very good position on this market, because they should pay also for renewable energy, they should pay for this. So I don't know what is some
public social obligations.
Yes, they have some social obligations, and so that, because we should understand that nuclear itself, they put their own.
Yeah, we see those inequalities on power
radioactive waste
market.
management, second to decommissioning, third to uranium mining. So they have their own branches to spend money for. And if we would have take this money for some obligations or for some renewable energy,
then the price of electricity from the nuclear will go up, and it will
the price will go
lowest and the cheapest one.
And yes, we should first of all think about the safety issues.
More questions at least, and I see those hands rise, so I would like to give them floor as well. And thank you for mentioning these plans and positions. And I just want to remind everyone on that Ukraine has prepared the draft concept of energy transition till 2050. It has not been approved, and it is on hold, speaking frankly so far. No one knows what will be the destiny of that document. But for example, in that document, it was written that the nuclear will have a portion of up to 25% in power in 2050. So anyhow, even at that strategic level, there were talks about some shortening of the portion of nuclear in the total power sector. But as I just said, this document was not approved so far. I see at least two hands raised now, and I would like to give a floor now to Mr. Matti Anelis, So I will ask you to switch on your camera and to address your issue.
Thank you, Oksana. A great or interesting discussion. I'm from the Center for Liberal Modernity, a Berlin-based think tank. I have two interconnected questions, but first, we recently had a discussion with Irina Stavchuk, the Vice Ecology Minister, not Energy Minister, and we were talking about required investment into nuclear. And we today heard that most of the nuclear power plants are nearing their lifetime by 2035. So would it be possible to attach price tags for the approximate price tags for the modernization that is required then? Because then you will have to face a political decision and weigh the required investment versus the alternatives, right? So this would be my first question. And the second question, probably directed to Alexandra, is the opinion. Germans are always struck by Ukrainian public opinion or polling when it comes to nuclear. So, and I haven't seen the more recent data, but maybe you can elaborate the changes in the political perception, or aren't there any changes vis-a-vis? Is Ukrainian public getting more critical of nuclear or more supportive of green technology? So maybe you can briefly update us on that front too. Thank you.
Thank you. As any of our speakers would like to address the first question, I saw Mr. Anthony Frogat was just waving with his hand.
Yeah, happy to come in. But I guess it's a question of economics, isn't it? In terms of what was being talked about was, I think there's the question about the economics of new build versus the economics of life extending. And it's very clear that life extending a reactor is far cheaper than building a new one. In theory, also, if you're life extending, some of the decommissioning costs have already been taken away, etc. So, I mean, firstly, in terms of new build, I don't think anyone is really arguing that if we had a competitive tender system, that nuclear power would be cheaper than renewables, in particular wind. I mean, just to give an example, in terms of the UK, offshore wind, which is a far more expensive form of renewables than onshore wind, when they first started when they first signed the contract for the Hinkley Point C, which is the newest reactor in the UK that's being built, the cost of onshore wind was £120, so around 130, 140 euros a megawatt hour. In the latest round of bidding that was last year, it was at 40 euros a megawatt hour. The fixed price for nuclear that was agreed during the process to agree to build Hinkley Point C is £90 a megawatt hour. So already, looking forward, when this is built, if it's built and completed in about 5 years' time, then nuclear power would be probably around twice as expensive as renewable energy. And the UK prides itself as being a competitive market. So I think in terms of new build, that any rational economist will say that nuclear is more expensive. In terms of life extension, I think it's more difficult. But again, as we start to see the costs of renewables falling, we also have to look at the cost of keeping reactors operating. And as you get older, as we know with anything, cars, televisions, etc., there's a certain life in which it's relatively cheap to operate the equipment because they all have their own operating life. But as they get older, the repairs cost more, etc., etc. So various studies, in particular in the United States, have shown that nuclear life extensions of nuclear are more expensive than building new renewables. That may not be the case everywhere, but I think that is the trend that we will increasingly see. So I do think one would look to renewables, both in terms of independence from any country, but it was talked about in some of the previous presentations in terms of the importance of being independent from Russia. You don't have fuel dependency, you don't have waste management dependency if you build renewables. You have, as I mentioned, in terms of the economics, But also maybe, sorry, just the final point is just to think about Ukraine as a strategic opportunity. Ukraine has very large landmass. And in terms of renewables, being able to look for importing electricity into the EU and making profits, then this is surely an opportunity that one would look at as a strategic resource that Ukraine and other countries can have to become the powerhouse of the European markets. And so, yeah, I would really look at it in that regard. In some ways, we see that already with the Power Bridge project, which is looking at importing electricity from nuclear power plants. Maybe there's an opportunity for Ukraine to generate significant income by importing renewably generated electricity. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And yep, it is very, let's say, unresearched so far, how much it will cost for us future additional life extension of already 10 and 20 years life extended units, and how that electricity will cost in future. And now I would like to invite Alexandra to comment on the second question on public opinion.
Thank you. Last year, EcoAction, together with the Friedrich Ebert Fund, conducted a social survey regarding the attitude of people towards renewables, energy efficiency, and nuclear power also. And what I can say, comparing to the results of the survey we conducted in 2017, as I remember, so 2 years before, people became more positive about the renewables. And we face the opposite situation with nuclear. People don't believe in nuclear so much anymore. So that's the attitude that we saw from our survey.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. So now let's go again to Anna Verov. I see your hand. Just please switch on your camera and address your question.
Yes, I would address a short question or comment, or rather a comment to Anthony. Of course, renewables are really the most expensive, of course, and if you regard these levelized costs of electricity. But you should consider anyway, if you want to build a perspective for Ukraine, building an energy system on variable renewables, that variable renewables as wind and solar do not go without system costs, of course, with very high system costs. So it is precisely these costs which determine the costs of a renewable energy system. And so you should anyway include the costs of the backup or of the electricity storage infrastructure, which has to be available for these variable renewables as well. So the system goes much more expensive as the simple levelized costs of electricity. And do not forget, even if you discuss such a system for Ukraine, please keep in mind that in Germany, we got to this level of, of success of renewable energies with large enhancement projects, which costs about 30 billion euros a year, so which is covered by the electricity cost itself, but by subsidies as well. So if you want really to create a holistic picture of what does such an energy system cost, I would like to have a little bit more, I would say a less enthusiastic picture of the renewables. I think that would be a little bit more honest when giving Ukraine a perspective on this issue. Personally, I think the Ukrainian plan to build decarbonization on a trunk of 25% of nuclear plus renewables, it seems to me very, very rational, because in a way it may resolve this issue of backup for variable renewables. But I agree with you that Ukraine has really a large potential for renewables, of course. I would agree in this point, of course.
Thank you so much. And we have a comment on your comment from Alexei Pasyuk in chat on that 50% of nuclear in Ukraine now requires storage because of night overcapacity. And using this opportunity, I would stress now that everything needs really very big evidence base, and we need research on how much and what type of power costs were. And here we as the foundation, as Heinrich Böll Foundation, are going to implement a research on how much and how feasible system and different type of electricity will cost till 2030 if we, for example, phase out coal. So, but what I would like to really stress on now that every estimations we do, they really need very big evidence for particular country, and for sure for Ukraine there should be more research done on costs. And I see the hand from Mr. Jan Haverkamp, so please go ahead.
I just wanted to link into that very shortly. The comparison, of course, LCOE is only one instrument here. But I'm a bit surprised to hear the word system costs in the last month suddenly appearing from every corner where anybody from the nuclear sector is opening his or her mouth. Obviously, there is a new trend within the nuclear industry now to push that as the new argument to make renewables look more expensive. The reality is that renewable prices continue to go lower and that nuclear costs are continuing to rise. Having said that, if I look at the Ukrainian situation, we are looking to a country that does need to invest a lot in its national grid. The Ukrainian national grid has, at this moment, is well, let's say it, challenging. We have seen a lot of investments made in the last few years, but they have all been oriented on a centralized system based on centralized nuclear production. But the large bulk of investment in the grid still has to come, and we need to take very urgently a decision on whether Ukraine wants to continue to centralize and running the risk with that to price itself out of the international electricity market, and of course also out of the international competitiveness of energy intensive industries, or whether it will follow a more decentralized system with the opportunity to lower its cost overall. For that, we need to make scenario comparisons. They have not been made properly for Ukraine. There are a few scenarios worked out for Ukraine in the past, but they are at this moment already old and overtaken by the realities on the ground. If we look at the German example, stating that the renewable sector has received a lot of subsidies and still that there is money going into it, does not really reflect the reality of lowering costs and the fact that new projects in the renewable sector in Germany and in the rest of Europe are at this moment made without subsidies. And it also does not reflect the incredible amount of subsidies that have gone into the nuclear sector historically, and that the nuclear sector at this moment still is profiting from. If I take everything together, I think that this is a very important discussion for Ukraine on this very moment. Ukraine needs to take a direction, and then looking at Khmelnytsky 3 and 4, I would say is being diverted from what really needs to happen. Khmelnytsky 3 and 4 are in an abominable state, the concrete which is already standing. If any construction is going to happen there, it will be one of the more expensive sites because of the site work that needs to be redone. The site work that is already in place will not allow for more modern designs, which means we will have to focus on generation 2 reactors that cannot be brought up to a level of acceptable risk without incredible investments, I think that the discussion on a future direction is extremely opportune for Ukraine today, and not something for 2035. We have just discussed the situation at the Zaporozhye nuclear power station, a nuclear power station that has received a lifetime extension, although without, or let's say with a very bare bone assessment for the future. But if Zaporozhye has problems with its diesel generators, then we're facing a very dangerous situation at this moment. That will lead to enormous costs coming up. It is not a discussion for 2035. It's a discussion for today, the direction that we need to take for Ukraine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan, so much. And yes, that's why we are here to discuss now what we can do. I'm really happy to see the hot discussion that is now at the moment, but I really want to avoid that this is discussion between few people. So I would like to proceed a bit further, and thank you, Jan, for mentioning the third and fourth units of potentially new units at Khmelnytsky nuclear station. We have just a few minutes left for our today's event. And I wanted to be sure that we have discussed everything that we wanted at the moment. And if anyone would like to comment, on the third and fourth blocks, just Alexandra texted me that she would like to do so.
Yes, I wanted to add on the Khmelnytsky 3 and 4. In my opinion, this process is not made really to build those units, but to get and use money for the construction of them, and to create an image that something is done in the nuclear field, that there is some way for the nuclear to still be alive on the Ukrainian market. But really, I personally don't believe that this project will be ever completed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra, for your comment. We are at the time of almost 90 minutes past from the beginning of our today's event. So at this moment, I would like to stop the discussion, but we for sure would be happy to stay with all of you in touch. And we will share the recording of today's event with all of you, as well as presentations of our panelists. I would like to tell thank you to everyone who has participated with us today, and especially for our prominent panelists for their very valuable input. Also, I would like to remind all of you that there is a short survey form to receive a feedback from you on the event organization. And as we are organizing such events on a regular basis, and this was the third one, that's why we would like to know your opinion and to adjust on your demand our future events. So thank you, everyone. And I would like to pass word to Robert for the last closing remark.
Well, thank you, Oksana, and big thanks to all our speakers. I think it was a very interesting discussion. Actually, I don't have particular closing remarks. I think it would be an impossible task now to summarize it. I just subscribe to the closing remarks that you already made. And yeah, we'll be in touch with everyone on the next round of this European-Ukrainian Roundtable. Thanks for being with us this afternoon or evening, and yeah, see you next time, hopefully. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.